I have commanded the Vashti dry docks for 11 years, and in that time I had never seen my own trackers refuse an order. That is what the Dren did to them. She came into dock wounded 3 days after the Corvain engagement, a war beast the size of a Corvette, all plated hide and coiled muscle, bonded to my flagship since she was small enough to carry in 2 arms. A splinter of enemy ordnance had buried itself under the plating along her foreleg, deep enough that it had begun to fester, and she would not let anyone near it. Not the ship's surgeons, not the beast handlers I had personally selected from 3 fleets. Not my own bondmaster, a man who had raised her from a hatchling and who came away from the berth with a torn sleeve and a look on his face I had not seen on him before. The look of a man who no longer recognized something he loved. I sent for the best. That is the part I am least proud of, looking back, because the best meant men and women with tranquilizer lances and restraint nets and 40 years of combined experience handling creatures twice her size, and every one of them treated her like a problem to be solved from a safe distance. She broke 2 lances. She put a handler through a support strut. By the 4th day the wound had gone the color of old bruised fruit, and my chief surgeon told me, flatly, that if we could not get within arm's reach of that leg inside another day, we would lose her, and possibly lose the dry dock section around her as well. I remember standing in the observation gallery that morning watching 2 of my finest trackers argue over whether a wider net or a heavier one would finally hold her, as if the problem had ever been the size of the net. My bondmaster stood apart from them, saying nothing, still favoring the arm she had torn. He had known her since she was small enough to sleep across his boots, and he told me later the worst part was not the wound. It was that she had stopped recognizing his voice as a safe sound. I did not know then what it would take to give that back to her. It was my logistics officer, not I, who mentioned the human. There was a small contract crew working our supply chain that quarter, auditors mostly, and 1 veterinarian attached, to look after the transport livestock the auditors traveled with. I had forgotten the man existed. When my officer suggested we bring him down to look at a war beast bonded to an Imperial flagship, I laughed. I want to be honest about that. I laughed, and I said something about not sending a stable hand to do a surgeon's work, and I sent him away. He came back an hour later with the vet in tow, and by then I was tired and frightened enough for her to say yes. His name was Reese Calder. He was younger than I expected, sandy-haired, with the unhurried walk of a man who has spent a great deal of his life around animals that could kill him, and has stopped finding that remarkable. He did not salute. He looked at the berth, at the torn nets, at the 2 lances still lying where they'd been dropped, and he asked, in a voice pitched for a normal conversation, whether anyone had actually looked at the wound or just at the leg. I did not understand the distinction. He explained it while he rolled his sleeves, that a beast in pain protects the whole limb because it does not know yet which part hurts, and that every team we had sent in had gone straight for the leg, which is the one thing a hurt animal will always fight you over. He asked for a bucket of warm water, a plain cloth, and whatever bland food the kitchens had on hand. No lance, no net. My chief surgeon, to her credit, did not laugh at him the way I had. She simply said she would not be responsible for what happened, and stepped back to the observation rail with the rest of us. He went into that berth with a bucket and a cloth and nothing else, and every officer on that deck held their breath the way you hold it before an artillery volley. He did not walk toward the leg. He walked toward her head, low, unhurried, talking the whole time in that same flat conversational voice, not to us, to her, about nothing in particular, the weather in the dock, the smell of the coolant lines. He set the food within her reach, sat down on the deck plating an arm's length from a jaw that had put 2 of my best people in the infirmary, and simply waited. It took her the better part of an hour to lower her head to the food. I know because I counted every minute of it, standing at that rail with my hands locked behind my back so no one would see them shaking. When she finally did eat, he did not move to touch the leg. He waited longer still, until her breathing changed, until the great muscled shoulder came down off its guard by degrees I would not have noticed if I had not been watching for exactly that. Only then did he wet the cloth and begin, with no more ceremony than a man washing a dish, to clean the crusted matter away from the edge of the wound. She flinched. He stopped, waited, spoke again in that same unbothered voice, and started over lower down the leg, working his way up toward the worst of it a hand's width at a time, so that by the time he reached the buried splinter itself, she had already let him touch every inch of skin around it. I have watched veteran field medics work under fire with less patience than that man showed a wounded animal on a routine afternoon. He drew the splinter with a pair of ordinary forceps from his own kit, packed the wound with a plain antiseptic paste, and wrapped it in cloth bandaging he had brought in his own bag. No fleet-issue synth mesh, no military-grade anything, just the same kit, I learned later, that he carried for the auditor's transport goats. When he stood up and stepped back out of the berth, wiping his hands on his trousers, the whole deck was silent. He looked faintly embarrassed by that, the way a man looks when he has walked into a room mid-argument that was not his business. He asked, to no one in particular, whether someone could bring her fresh water twice a day and change the dressing on the schedule he wrote out, and that was all he said about it. I asked him, once the deck had breathed again, why none of my trackers had managed what he had just done in under 2 hours. He thought about it seriously, the way a man thinks about a question he has genuinely never been asked, and said most people trained to handle dangerous animals are trained to control them, and a herd animal does not want to be controlled. It wants to be left alone by everyone except the one person willing to sit still long enough to be trusted. He said it the way another man might tell you the shift schedule. He did not seem to think he had done anything remarkable. I am fairly certain, to this day, that he still does not. I offered him a commission on the spot, rank, quarters befitting an officer, a title with the flagship's name attached to it. He turned it down, mildly, the way he'd turned down my chief surgeon's assumption that he'd need a sedative gun. He said he had a contract with the auditor's livestock that still had 4 months on it, and he did not care for titles much, but that he would not mind coming by the dry dock in the mornings, if someone would let him, just to check on her leg and sit with her a while. He has been coming by every morning since. The dren will not eat from anyone else's hand now, and I have stopped pretending that bothers me. My trackers have started asking him quiet questions in the mess hall. How long to wait before you move? Whether you ever stop being afraid of the jaw, or just learn to stop showing it. He answers it all the same unhurried way, as if it were no more than dock arithmetic. My bondmaster sits with him some mornings too, the two of them saying little, while she dozes between them, legs stretched into the light. I asked him once whether it troubled him that she'd let a stranger in faster than she'd let him back. He said it didn't. The human had nothing to prove to anyone, least of all her, and that had made all the difference in how fast she believed him. I tell this story now to junior officers proud of their training and their nets and their 40 years of combined experience, because I want them to understand what I did not, standing at that rail with my hands locked behind my back, that the wound was never the hard part. The hard part was being willing to sit still, and to want nothing back for it, and to let a frightened animal, or, I have come to think since, a frightened anyone, decide in its own time that you could be trusted. Reese Calder has never once asked me for anything more than water and a clean cloth. I have stopped offering him anything grander. He would only turn it down again, mildly, and go on doing the small job in front of him, as if it had never occurred to him there was any other kind worth doing.